How's it going, everyone? I'm Landan with LMR.com. In this video, we're going to be talking about the installation steps on our SVE Hydroboost plumbing kit that is designed specifically for power by the hours speed drive setup. First things first here, guys, if you are wanting to know a little bit more about the specifics of this SVE Hydroboost plumbing kit, be sure and check out the link in the video description. Now, in that video, I explain each kit in more detail and go over all of the components that the kit includes and, of course, cover important technical information. We are going to be installing one of our SVE Hydroboost plumbing kits into a car that belongs to a mutual friend of LMR. This car is going to be a Teal 93 Cobra clone with several modern amenities related to a Coyote Swap. It is still in the early stages of the swap, but most of you that are installing the SVE Hydroboost plumbing kit will more than likely be at a similar point in your build as well. The 99 to 04 V8 Hydroboost assembly, power by the hour speed drive setup, and a takeoff forward power steering pump are already installed in the car, so this video will cover the proper routing and placement of all of the hoses and their associated components. I would recommend that you neatly lay out all of the provided components, as this will give you the opportunity to familiarize yourself with everything that the kit includes. Other recommendations that I have for you is to use a fender mat, work as clean as possible, and leave everything loose until all of the hoses are installed. This is going to help with final clocking and the positioning of the hoses. To get started, support the car via a lift or get it as high and as safe as you can if you're going to be working off of jack stands. Locate the high pressure hoses and the banjo fittings. Note that the banjo bolts are different sizes, and that one is an M18 and the other is an M16. The M18 banjo bolt installs into the port at the center of the Hydroboost assembly. Thread this banjo bolt into the Hydroboost assembly and leave it loose. Take the high pressure hose that has a straight fitting on one end and a 120-degree fitting on the other, and feed the end of the hose that has the straight fitting toward the Hydroboost assembly. This hose will slide in between the master cylinder and the strut tower. Loosely tighten the straight fitting onto the banjo fitting. Take the other banjo fitting and bolt, loosely thread this into the outermost port on the Hydroboost. Use the high pressure hose that has a 90-degree fitting on one end and a 45-degree fitting on the other. Route it alongside the hose you just installed with the 90-degree fitting going towards the Hydroboost assembly. Loosely thread this fitting onto the banjo fitting. Now it's time to head underneath the car. Carefully install the Teflon seal onto the non-flared end of the provided power steering pump fitting. This is easily done by using the threads as a guide and turning it into place. Place the power steering pump fitting, steering rack fitting, and the factory style hardline on a towel and apply the provided thread locking compound to the threads. Install the power steering pump fitting into the bottom of the power steering pump and torque it to 22 to 24 pound-feet. Install the hardline into the upper port on the steering rack. Get it started and then run it down with an adjustable wrench. In order to fully tighten this fitting, you will need a 3-inch extension and an 11/16 crow's foot. Now you can install the AN conversion fitting into the lower port on the steering rack, and the torque spec for it is 22 pound-feet. Loosely thread the 120-degree fitting on the high pressure hose into the fitting in the power steering pump. Loosely thread the 45-degree fitting on the other high pressure hose and in the fitting on the steering rack. If needed, go ahead and clock the hardline to clear the steering rack boot or other components in the area. Pass one of the provided clamps over the upper power steering cooler tube fitting, followed by the rubber hose that is connected to the hardline. Push the hose onto the fitting until it almost touches the core support, and then position the clamp into place. Grab the provided rubber hose that has the short 90-degree bend at the end. Position a hose clamp over the straight end of the hose, and then install this end onto the middle barb on the T-fitting. Slide the clamp into place. Run this hose beside the other hoses and position the 90-degree end toward the Hydroboost assembly. Position a clamp over the fitting, followed by the hose, and then slide the clamp into place. Back underneath the car, slide one of the small hose clamps over the lower power steering cooler tube fitting, followed by a 2-foot section of 3/8 inner diameter hose. Slide the hose down the tube until it is even with the upper hose and position the hose clamp into place. Slide another clamp over the other end of the hose and install the hose onto one end of the barb fitting on the T. Depending on your car and the positioning of certain components, the hose may need to be shortened, so you can go ahead and shorten it at this time. Now, depending on how and where you mounted the power steering overflow reservoir will determine the length of the other 2-foot hose. For demonstration purposes, we're using a Ford reservoir from a 99 to 04 Mustang. Slide a clamp over one end of the hose and install this onto the appropriate bar fitting on the reservoir. Position the clamp into place. The other end of this hose will connect to the last open fitting on the T. Position the hose towards the T and mock it up so that it doesn't have any funky bends or kinks. Use a hose cutting tool and cut the hose to length. Position the clamp into place. Install this end onto the T and position the clamp into place. Now you need to locate the low pressure side of the pump. Typically, these bar fittings face up, so not too sure what's going on this particular car as this one is facing down. Regardless, the provided 5/8 inner diameter hose will install onto this fitting and the large fitting on the reservoir. Position one of the larger clamps over the hose. Install the hose over the bar fitting and position the clamp into place. Route the other end of the hose towards the reservoir and cut it to length. Slide a clamp over the hose and install it onto the reservoir. Of course, position the clamp into place. Now you can begin dialing in all of the hoses. Make your way to each section in the grouping of hoses and secure them to each other with some zip ties. Once you have all the hoses neatly secured, we can start tightening all of the hose fittings. Now, because of the location and design of some of the fittings, you may not be able to use a torque wrench, but just to clear the air, I am going to list the recommended torque specs for all of the fittings. As always, use some common sense and don't over tighten any of the fittings. Start out by torquing the banjo bolts. The M18 banjo bolt will torque to 74 pound-feet, and the M16 banjo bolt will torque to 59 pound-feet. Now, when tightening these down, you will have to keep tension on the hose fittings in order to keep them from rotating with the bolt. Tighten all the high-pressure fittings to 18 to 23 foot-pounds using an 11/16 wrench. Once everything is tight, check over all of your work. After that, you're good to go. Wrapping things up here, guys, if you're wanting to eliminate the guesswork and get right down to business, definitely consider our SVE Hydroboost plumbing kit. I mean, I'm telling you, this kit is a legit solution for your Coyote Swapped 79 to 04 Mustang project. Of course, you'll be able to fill and bleed the system whenever you get the car to where it will idle on its own. Since most of you are going to be in the middle of your project anyway, you'll have the luxury of going at your own pace. If you have any questions on this kit, of course, be sure to reach out to us in the comments, call us, or shoot us an email. Of course, for the most current product information, pricing, and availability on anything in the kit, always reference lmr.com. If you like this video, be sure and give it a thumbs up. To see more how-to and review videos covering industry-leading products, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Turn on notifications, that way you're notified every time we release something new. And while you're at it, check out our other videos. For all things 1979 to present Mustang and SVT lighting, keep it right here with the real enthusiasts, lmr.com.